Panic on the streets, chaos at the ATMs, and silence in the Kremlin. What you are seeing is not just a protest, it is a financial heart attack. While the Russian police try to control the angry crowds demanding their own money, Vladimir Putin has quietly given the order that signals the end of the empire. Sell the gold. The cash is gone. The banks are firing thousands. And for the first time, even the soldiers on the front line are being told, "Sorry, no pay today." Russia isn't just losing the war, it is going broke. For years, we were told that Russia's economy was a fortress, that they had endless reserves, that sanctions made them stronger. Well, look at the lines in front of Sberbank today. Does that look like strength to you? We are witnessing a perfect storm. It started with a whisper, turned into a run on the banks, and has now escalated into a desperate sell-off of the state's most precious asset, its gold reserves. From the frozen regions of Yakutia, where soldiers' widows are left empty-handed, to the boardrooms of Moscow, where bankers are packing their bags, the system is cracking. Before we dive into how this financial collapse is dismantling Putin's army from the inside, make sure to subscribe to Mr. Warlog. We follow the money because the money never lies. Let's start at the very top. Why is the Kremlin panicking? The Express UK reports that the Russian economy is in free fall. But here is the detail that matters. The state has begun liquidating its gold. Gold is the last resort. You don't sell your gold when business is good. You sell it when you cannot pay the bills. You sell it when your currency is becoming worthless and your oil revenues are blocked by drones in the Black Sea. Putin is burning through the national savings to plug a hole in the budget that gets bigger every day. He is trading the country's future stability for a few more months of war. But here is the problem. The people have noticed. When the government starts acting desperate, the people start acting rational. They run. Look at these images shared by Maria Drutska. These aren't people waiting for a new iPhone. These are people trying to rescue their life savings before the doors close. Proofy.ru confirms the scale of the panic. In the third quarter alone, Russians withdrew 659 billion rubles in cash. That is a 500% increase compared to last year. Why? Because of fear. URA News reports that Russians are terrified of digital detention. They know the state needs money. They know the state is freezing accounts of people who don't support the war or dodge the draft. So, they are voting with their wallets. They are taking their money out of Putin's digital control and putting it under the mattress. Cash is the only freedom left. And how are the banks responding to this exodus? They are collapsing from the inside. The Moscow Times reports a bloodbath in the banking sector. Sberbank, the largest bank in Russia, plans to cut 20% of its staff. That's more than 22,000 people losing their livelihoods. And now VTB, the second largest bank, has announced it will follow suit. Think about what this means. These banks are the pillars of the Russian state. If they are firing tens of thousands of employees, it means they are bleeding cash. It means the loan market has died. It means they are preparing for a long, hard winter of insolvency. These aren't just statistics. These are families who were the backbone of Putin's stability, now thrown into poverty. But why are the banks failing? Is it just withdrawals? No. It's because the loans they gave out are turning into dust. The Express has uncovered a terrifying figure from the Credit Bank of Moscow, MKB. This bank has 668 billion rubles in bad loans, money that will never be paid back. Let me put that in context for you. When the US banking system collapsed in 2008, the bad loan ratio was around 3 to 4%. The Credit Bank of Moscow is sitting on 12.3%. This is a zombie bank. It is technically bankrupt, kept alive only by accounting tricks. And it is not alone. The entire Russian financial system is infected with toxic debt from companies that can't pay and soldiers who are dead. And speaking of companies that can't pay, the Express highlights another catastrophe. The transport sector is going bankrupt. Logistics companies, the arteries of the economy, are collapsing under the weight of 21% interest rates and high fuel costs. If the trucks stop moving, the food doesn't get to the cities. If the trains stop moving, the tanks don't get to the front. The economic crisis is morphing into a logistical paralysis. But here is the most dangerous development of all, the one that could end the regime. The money has run out for the army. The Express reports a humiliation for Putin in the region of Yakutia. The regional government has run out of funds. They have stopped paying the sign-on bonuses. They have stopped paying the families of the dead. Sorry, we have no money. That is the message to the mothers of the fallen. Think about the psychological impact of this. Men from Yakutia were sent to the meat grinder in Donetsk with the promise that their families would be taken care of. Now they realize it was a lie. If you don't pay the mercenaries, they stop fighting. If you don't pay the army, they turn their guns around. This isn't just an economic issue. It is a regime survival issue. All of this, the gold sales, the bank runs, the unpaid wages, is the result of what economists are calling reverse sanctions. Putin thought he could bankrupt the West by cutting off gas. Instead, he has bankrupted Russia by cutting off its future. The state is cannibalizing itself. It steals from the banks to pay for the war. It steals from the pensioners to buy drones. And now, it is stealing from the soldiers themselves. But the banking crisis is just the heart attack. Now let's look at the paralysis of the limbs. A country as vast as Russia lives and dies by its logistics. If you can't move food from the south to the north, people starve. If you can't move ammo to the front, you lose the war. The Express has published a terrifying report. Russian transport companies are facing mass bankruptcy. Why? Because of the triple kill. 1. Fuel prices. Inflation has made diesel too expensive. 2. Spare parts. Sanctions mean they can't fix their Western trucks, Volvo, Scania. 3. Interest rates. The 21% rate means they can't lease new trucks or pay their debts. The report suggests that hundreds of logistics firms are on the brink of collapse. This is the arterial blockage of the Russian economy. When the trucks stop, the supermarket shelves go empty not because there is no food, but because there is no one to bring it. This is how the banking crisis becomes a hunger crisis. If the banks are empty and the companies are bankrupt, how is Putin still paying for the war? The answer reveals the true depth of the panic. He is selling the family jewels. The Express and financial analysts confirm that the Kremlin has begun liquidating its gold reserves and the liquid assets of the National Wealth Fund. Gold is the last resort of a dictator. You don't sell your gold when you are winning. You sell it when your currency is worthless, your oil revenue is down due to Ukrainian drone strikes, and your banks are zombies. Putin is burning through the savings of future generations to buy artillery shells for a war he cannot win. He is pawning the country's future to pay for his present mistakes. But here is the problem with selling gold. Eventually, you run out. And when the gold is gone, the printing press starts, and hyperinflation, the kind that destroyed the Soviet Union, begins. And while the state sells gold, the average Russian is losing their dream of a home. We talked about high interest rates hurting banks, but look at what it does to construction. With mortgage rates hitting 28% to 30%, the housing market has frozen. No one can afford to buy. The Moscow Times reports that demand has collapsed. Why does this matter? Because construction is the engine of the Russian domestic economy. It employs millions. If developers go bankrupt because no one buys apartments, they default on their massive loans to banks like VTB and Sberbank. Do you see the cycle? 1. The central bank raises rates to stop inflation. 2. The rates kill the construction sector. 3. The developers default on loans. 4. The banks, already in crisis, collapse further. It is a doom loop, and there is no exit. But the most shameful, the most dangerous crack in the system isn't in Moscow. It is in the frozen Far East, in Yakutia. This is the story that could end the war from the inside. The Express reports a total humiliation for Putin. The regional government of Yakutia, a region that sent thousands of men to the meat grinder in Donetsk, has run out of money. They have stopped paying the sign-on bonuses. They have stopped paying the social support to the families of the mobilized. Sorry, the coffers are empty. That is the message to the mothers of the dead. Think about the psychological impact. These men didn't go to war for ideology. They went for money, to escape poverty. The social contract was, you give us your life, we give your family a future. Putin has broken that contract. If you don't pay the mercenaries, they stop fighting. If you don't pay the regions, they stop sending men. Yakutia is the canary in the coal mine. If a resource-rich region like Yakutia is bankrupt, what is happening in Dagestan, in Buryatia? This is how empires fracture. Not from the center, but from the periphery, when the provinces realize that the capital is just a parasite sucking them dry. So, how are people surviving? By going into the shadows. URA News reports on the cash withdrawal panic not just as fear, but as a shift to the gray economy. Businesses are operating off the books to avoid taxes and bank seizures. This is a disaster for the Kremlin. A gray economy pays no taxes. If tax revenue collapses, how does Putin pay for the war next month? He can't. He will have to print more money, fueling the inflation that started this whole mess. He is trapped in a room where the walls are closing in, and he is the one pushing the button to close them faster. So let's step back and look at the full picture of this catastrophe. The banks are zombie institutions with 668 billion in bad debts. The people are pulling 659 billion rubles in cash out of fear. The industry is firing tens of thousands of workers. The logistics are bankrupt. The gold is being sold. And the soldiers in Yakutia are not getting paid. And while Russia bleeds cash, there is a predator watching from the east, waiting to pick the bones clean. China. We talked about selling gold, but who is buying it? And more importantly, who is lending money to the Kremlin now that Western markets are closed? The Kremlin is issuing bonds in Chinese yuan. This is the ultimate humiliation. Russia is borrowing money in a foreign currency to pay its own bills. It has turned into a client state. Beijing is not a charity. They are buying Russian resources at rock-bottom prices and selling Russia cars and microchips at a 300% markup. Russia isn't just broke, it is being colonized economically. The bank run in Moscow is just the symptom. The disease is that Russia no longer owns its own economy. Finally, we must look at the victims who cannot run, cannot fight, and cannot emigrate. The pensioners. For 25 years, Putin's deal with the elderly was simple. I pay your pensions on time, you vote for me. That deal is dead. With real inflation on food hitting 30%, far higher than the official rate, and pensions stagnant, the elderly are being pushed into starvation. The gold that was sold? That was their safety net. The National Welfare Fund was supposed to pay for their future. Now it is paying for artillery shells in Donetsk. When the grandmothers of Russia start standing in line not for voting, but for withdrawing their funeral savings in panic, the regime has lost its last line of defense. So, let's look at the big picture. The gold is being sold, the people are pulling their cash, the banks are firing their staff, and the soldiers are fighting for free. This is not a war economy, this is a liquidation sale. Russia is closing down the business of being a state. The panic you see in those bank lines is the realization that the emperor has no clothes and no money. What do you think? Can Putin survive if the soldiers stop getting paid? Will the bank run trigger a total collapse before the winter ends? I really want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. If you found this analysis valuable, if you want to understand the economic war that really matters, hit that like button and subscribe to Mr. Warlog. We bring you the truth behind the propaganda. I am Charlie from the Mr. Warlog team. Stay sharp. Thanks for watching.